let's start with Tennessee losing a commitment to Oregon. And I think it's important to note who they lost to Oregon. Tell me who they lost, because this is not the typical type of player that Tennessee would have lost.
Yes, so USC offensive lineman Emmanuel Pregnon transferred to Oregon. Tennessee was targeting him heavily because, as we know, they are lacking in the interior of the offensive line with Cooper Mays and Javonte Spraggins gone, and we don't know what's going to happen with Andre Carrick, who's still fighting for a year of eligibility. So they were very much in the running for him. They were trying to land him, and he ended up transferring to Oregon, which was a major blow. And this follows, by the way, another offensive guard, Josh Thompson, who transferred to – he was a Northwestern transfer, by the way, and he ended up transferring to LSU 2 weeks ago. So that's two offensive guards Tennessee targeted heavily that they lost out on. Not to mention Zacharias Branch, the Georgia transfer wide receiver that they went after that they didn't land. And everybody's going to point out that they did get Amari Jefferson, but we had Amari Jefferson on last week. And Dave, let's be honest, there wasn't anything special about what Tennessee was doing to land Amari Jefferson. It was just with him not wanting to go to Alabama, Tennessee was his default school always. So I don't really – sorry, what were we going to say?
No, go ahead. Finish. I'm sorry. I was going to add something to your point, but go right ahead.
Yeah, so I don't – with that in mind, it's hard to say Tennessee has been impressive at all in the transfer portal this year. Their only actual pickup outside of a guy who they, again, were a default school to land was Wendell Moe Jr., good pickup, solid pickup out of Arizona, does fill a void. But as of right now, they're significantly lacking, and they are taking a lot more blows than they typically take in the transfer portal.
I'm not crazy about the kid out of Arizona. You know, he only, I think, started 3 games and played in a few. And listen, if you do that in the Big Ten of the SEC your freshman year, that's not bad. And it's, you know, somewhat kind of respectable, actually. If you start 3 games, would you agree? As an average player steps into the SEC, true freshman, if he plays at all on the offensive line, I think he's pretty good. I got respect for him, but I don't feel the same way when you're playing for the Pac-18 or the Pac-6 or whatever it may be that particular year.
Well, he only played 3 games this past year. As a freshman, he started almost every game, and he was all Pac-12 freshman. So we have to be fair to him on that.
What happened last year? I mean,
coaching change, system change, a lot of things could have gone wrong with that. Misuse of talent. Tennessee fans know firsthand players who are misused and then go and shine elsewhere because they were grossly misused at Tennessee.
Okay. I'm not judging him. I think you would agree it doesn't leap off the page, certainly like Amari Jefferson, where you say, wow, they killed it.
No, that's very true. You're right. They absolutely destroyed it. And with Amari, but again, there was nothing impressive. So losing out on Emmanuel Pregnon, I mean, look, this is an issue. There's a silver lining to this issue, I will say, which is that maybe Josh Heupel needs to stop focusing so heavily on the portal and focus more on developing the players that he actually recruited out of high school on the offensive line. Because
what did I tell you last year before the 2024 season when I was talking to someone with knowledge of Tennessee in Tennessee's football office and with great knowledge of the offensive line? I was told everything's good for 2024. Now, that wasn't the case because of injuries, and Lance Hurd wasn't probably as developed as we thought. John Campbell had an injury that he had to deal with too. So I'm willing to give him a bit of a pass on that. But I was told 2025, that could be the problem, was the exact quote. Do you remember me telling you that in August 2024?
Yes, you did. As a matter of fact, you randomly called me. This was actually a year before that, funny enough, going into after the 2022 season. And you called me, you were basically like, yeah, this guy's telling me that, like, I know that, like, what they're doing is not sustainable. And you were referring exactly to that.
That's right. Like I said, you're not going to step in and be a starter most of the time out of year one. But year 2, you better be a contributor. Year 3, you better be a starter, or you were misevaluated, and Tennessee or any other school did not appropriately get the right prospect for that position. Now, it was different before NIL at Alabama, there were 5-star offensive and defensive linemen that sat the bench that could have played at other schools, right? So we're talking about now. We're not talking about how Alabama went 3 deep. So 4 downs. Why is this happening? And it's brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. Here we go. Here's why the Vols might be struggling in the transfer portal. And I think we pretty much got it nailed down. Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. All right, it's on our poll question. How worried about it's misspelled. How worried are you about Vols' recent losses in transfer portal? We got very 50%, a little 35%, not at all 15%. Please pardon me on the misspelling. So let's go to first down. I have a new piece of equipment that I'm trying to get to work, and it's got all the Cooper drops on it and everything else. We'll have it tomorrow, but good gracious, I just can't figure it out. I'm not a tech guy. So let's do this. Cooper, what down? Tennessee center, Cooper base here. First down. Cooper, is it lack of NIL funds?
So I wouldn't have thought this early, but then I learned about how, from Will West last week, about how Tennessee had to shell out more than they thought to keep Nico Iamaleava and then Mike Matthews.
And the other thing he said too that I didn't write about just because I still plan to, is the fact that Tennessee's policy is get on campus, then you get offered. Whereas a 5-star from California calls Michigan, they say you got X right now. Hope to see you soon. That's a much different approach. I actually like Tennessee's more. I think it's more prudent, but I don't know that it's going to be as effective as the other.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I land. I'm not sure how effective it's going to be, but you're right. And that's a big thing. And so I wonder if shelling out more for a couple of players depleted their budget a little bit, plus their NIL strategy on how they do things. Plus, I wonder if they front loaded a lot of NIL with the hope that they could maybe make a splash and win a national title, and then they could get money on the back end from that. And that didn't come to fruition in 2024. So I think there's also the issue of, donors maybe drying up their funds a little bit, being like, how many checks do you expect me to write to see this team just go 10-3 and get bounced out in the first round of the college football playoff?
I think it's that. And I think Tennessee went through what any other team would go through, Caleb, with a new coach and being a traditional program. And I think there's about 25 of those or so. And I think that when you're new and hot in recruiting, that means something. It shouldn't. I mean, it absolutely shouldn't. Listen, I want to write a book one day, and it's called Getting Your Kid a High School Scholarship for Dummies. That shouldn't matter, but unfortunately it does. When you're hot, it's pretty obvious. Tennessee was really hot in 22-23. I think now they're just another school that you have a good feel for. So while there's optimism, there's not wild optimism. And that comes down to, I mean, let's face it. Did Brew McCoy is on some he's on some billboards about metal roofs. At the end of the day, how many metal roofs sold because of Brew McCoy? Or was it just the association with him that some Tennessee fan that owned that metal roof company wanted to be a part of? Well, at some point you say that money invested did not have a return. So I don't know that it's lack of NIL funds, maybe leveling of NIL funds. Is that fair?
No, I agree. That's totally fair. And it's funny you talk about that with programs being hot, because how many coaches have we covered throughout history, Dave, that their first year at a blue blood school, they're trying to rebuild. They maybe go 6-6, 7-6, and they sell that they're a program on the rise. And then they win over the fan base with multiple top 10 classes back to back. And then about 3 years later, they're fired. Anyway, happens all the time, right?
It does.
Uh,
It does.
and you're right. It's very easy to be the hot coach when you're your first year at a program, and there's not a lot of negatives on you yet.
Yep. Totally agree. All right, Coop, what down is next? Tennessee Senator Cooper Mays here. Second down. This we kind of touched base on this. Tennessee isn't as sexy of a place anymore. Listen, when you're averaging 1,500 points a game as they were in 2022, and you can check my math on that, I'm pretty sure I'm right. It was 1,500 points a game. When you're doing that, you've got a young coach, you've got this culture, everybody's getting along, everything's great. There is no arguing that Tennessee is as sexy as they were after the 2022 season. I mean, if they were Cindy Crawford coming off that season, they're Alyssa Milano now. How about that? Do you like that comparison?
Okay.
Alyssa Milano is she was in her prime. She was a good looking lady, but she was not Cindy Crawford. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. Here is, I agree, but here's what throws me off about it. So there is sexy in the face, and then there's sexy in the curves. And I say a good running football. Hold on, here where I'm going with this. See, and it's actually a great analogy. Good running football teams that win the trenches, that's sexy in the curves. That's
right. That's the girl who she's maybe a little bit more conservative. She is big into church. She doesn't drink, and then that offense that they had in 2022, that's the wild woman you want to go party with.
Yes, but the other one, the girl with the curves, and I mean, with the body figure, once you get her in the bed, never mind. Okay, so anyway,
no. It sounds like our guy Caleb is about to have another kid.
I'm just saying. There's hot on the surface, and then there's hot beyond the surface. And the running game is hot beyond the surface. And what I'm trying to say is the running game for Tennessee was so good last year. You thought the offensive guards were the I like big butts people. Okay, you didn't think they were the see the flashy hot face at the bar. You thought they were, look at the backside. Yes. And so I would have thought
Anaconda. Go ahead.
Yes, exactly.
Don't say that. I'm sorry. I went too far.
I didn't say it. I didn't go there. I would have thought that Tennessee as a running team this past year would have been sexy for an offensive guard, but they're missing out on interior offensive linemen, which is throwing me off a lot, to be honest. Because if you were an offensive guard and you just saw what Dylan Sampson did, Dave, wouldn't you want to go play for Tennessee?
Yeah. Well, I would, but I think they'd rather have three very good receivers than even an elite running back, right?
Oh, I think so too.
Okay.
I would too. Wouldn't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In this offense, especially, if you're doing some of the stuff Penn State's doing, maybe not. Dylan brings up a good point, which ties into first down. Cooper Mays first down. Truth is, we need about 10 more Jimmy Haslam's. Yeah, it wouldn't be bad. I mean, I wrote the column on it, and for those that didn't know, and this is not an exact way to track NIL money, but Ohio State's annual budget is $250 million. Tennessee's is $150 million. So there's not a direct correlation, but I think it's pretty obvious. If you've got more boosters giving more money, you're making more money that you're going to be able to get more players through NIL. All right, what down's next, Coop? LSU Senator Cooper Mays here, third down. Thank you again. I will get my soundboard working by tomorrow. There's not really a significant interest from the coaches as they'd prefer to build from within. This one's interesting because if so, this will either be the reason that Josh Heupel has success and everything's copacetic and he leaves on good terms. If this doesn't work, Tennessee could crater, because what happens if you want to build from within, if you want to go through the high school ranks and they get good and as juniors they transfer? This to me is the one I'm least sure of, but I'm most sure that it could be a make or break type of situation. I remind everyone that we broadcast live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln studios. Ted Russell Ford Lincoln is your home for the finest vehicles in Knoxville, new and used, East Tennessee's largest Ford and Lincoln volume dealer. So, Caleb, let me ask you this. You want to comment on third down first?
Yeah. So I wanted to the reason I said this is because of what we were told last week with Will West, which is that they don't promise NIL on the front and they want to get you to campus. That gives me a vibe, and I've heard this from a lot of people, that the way Tennessee approaches NIL is they think the back end after you're here more than any other program in the country. That's what they really think about. And that would lead to a vibe of you've always talked to me about culture, Dave, with what Heupel builds. What if there is this philosophy? What if Tennessee is seeing this philosophy of, look, we may not always have the most talented team, but in an era of the transfer portal where players are moving around so much, if we keep our core together year in and year out, we'll have certain chemistry advantages over other programs that help us win. I mean, it's very much a basketball approach. I've never really seen it work in football that way, but you've seen basketball teams, Dave, that were not as talented but worked well together. I mean, the bad boy Pistons weren't as talented as the Celtics, Lakers, or Bulls, but they won 2 titles because they were so close and played so well together. And
but probably more talent than you give them credit for. I mean, Joe Dumars and Isaiah Thomas, that was one of the best backcourts I've ever seen, especially since Dumars could early on, not in the third year that they played in the playoffs, but he was, I don't know if you remember, but there was a Sports Illustrated picture of him with his hand against Michael Jordan's head because he was considered the Jordan stopper.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
I don't know if you know that, but Jordan decided to develop an outside jump shot, and that's when Joe Dumars suddenly looked like a second-level player. All right, Coop, final down. Cooper Ray's here. All SC Center, 4th down. They'll be fine. Their work in the portal isn't done. So that is our poll question right now. Vols' biggest problem in transfer portal, not spending enough cash. Vols aren't as sexy. Vols want to build within. They're just fine. I'm going to tell you, they're not just fine. I think it's as simple as the cash. I think they're reeling that in a little bit. And I think other schools with some excitement around them, either schools that win championships or in the playoffs and deep into the playoffs, and they make more revenue because of that, or they have more revenue from boosters because somebody's trying to rebuild a program. I'm having trouble coming up with an example right off the top of my head. North Carolina might be a good example with Bill Belichick. We'll see what they can spend. But if I had to rank the 4, I would say not spending enough cash, which may not be the right move. The close second, Vols aren't as sexy, and Vols want to build within would be 3rd. They're not just fine. I'm eliminating that one right now.
Yeah, I would eliminate just fine too. Now, to be fair, not spending enough cash and want to build from within could actually be linked to a certain degree. Maybe they're saying, let's not spend enough cash in the portal. Let's focus on building from within. But you are right. I think that I think that if it's where I am, I'm going not spending enough cash. And I think they're not spending enough cash because they had to open up the checkbook to get Nico and Mike Matthews to return, at which point we sit there and say, and maybe Dave, you're right. I don't think Heupel's system is predicated on quarterbacks as I once thought. It's more predicated on the receivers getting open. If they had to spend too much on Nico, maybe they should have let him walk.
I told you last year that Gaston Moore would have kept his head above water. I didn't say he'd star, but I believe that, yes, it depends on the offense. Now, I thought the receivers were going to play better. So at the end of the day, with their injuries, they probably would have undermined him.